All right. Feel free, President Sethi.
Okay, welcome everybody to this evening's virtual community informational meeting and a special meeting of the ACWD Board of Directors. I would like somebody from the staff to take the roll call of Board of Directors, please.
Sure thing. Let's go ahead and call roll. Director Gunther.
Here.
Director Akbari. Director Wong.
Here.
Director Weed. And Director Sethi.
Here, Director Weed informed me earlier in the day that he would be attending, so he may still be joining in. Second item on our agenda is public comments on matters on this notice of the special meeting pertaining to this specific meeting. Are there any members of the public that would like to raise their hand, that would like to make comments on the subject matter of this meeting?
I do see a hand up, but what I'll do before we go to that hand, if it's okay with you, President Sethi, is just really quickly let our attendees know that if you'd like to participate in the meeting and speak up during questions and answers or this item on the agenda here, feel free to do that. The instructions on how to use Zoom, either the application or Zoom on your telephone, those instructions are on your agenda, how to participate in the meeting. The meeting is being recorded, and it'll be available to the public for future viewing too. So that was some housekeeping items, and I'm looking for hands raised in the meeting attendees. I do see Mr. Nishimura.
Yes, just as a point of order, President Sethi, now that this is a special board meeting, I assume that the format will still be as the third item, which is a community meeting, and that comments will be solicited during the presentation or at appropriate intervals during the presentation, or are you soliciting public comments for the entire presentation at this agenda item?
No, of course, we will take comments as we freely do during normal workshops or community meetings when we get to the next item here.
Right, there'll be ample time for folks to ask questions, but also provide input following in the presentation.
Right, absolutely. Don't want to discourage any public participation here, so we really encourage it and welcome it. Are there any other public comments?
There are no hands raised, and again, that's okay because we'll have plenty of opportunity after we go through a presentation.
Okay, for some reason, I cannot see hands raised from my viewpoint, but let's go to item number 3, which is the purpose of this evening, which is the community meeting on proposed increases to water rates and drought surcharges. And I will turn it over to staff here, please.
Great. Thanks very much, President Sethi, and thank you to those members of the public that have tuned in this evening. Very, very much appreciate your participation. We'll cover a fair amount of material. We'll try and keep it short. We really want to make this a discussion and provide ample opportunity again to answer questions, hear your input. But we do want to convey a little bit of context about the topic tonight as I promote a panelist. And so this is what we'll talk about. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. What I'm showing is the presentation overview. These are the topics we'll talk about. A little bit about ACWD, the process that we use for setting rates, why rate increases are necessary at all, what we're trying to do to ensure that we're being efficient and using our customers' money as appropriately as possible. An overview of the budget, the talk about the actual proposed rate increases themselves.
Ed, I'm going to step in there because actually we're not seeing the presentation. We're still seeing the notice slide.
Oh, thank you for stepping in. All right. I'm going to try that again. I appreciate you stepping in, John. How are
Yep.
you doing now? Does this look right?
Good now. Yep.
Okay. That's why I didn't see any heads nodding when I asked that. My apologies. Usually we have much more qualified people running this part of the meeting. My apologies to you all. But these are the things that we're going to be talking about, including whether the drought is over and what's going on with the drought. And then, a question we get occasionally is, how do I save money? How do I keep that water bill down? And how can I learn some more? So we're going to cover all of these topics. And again, we'll try and go through quickly. But first of all, a little bit about ACWD. We were founded back in 1914 by the boaters in our service area. We were the first agency formed under the County Water District Act of 1913. We're a public agency, and we're not a for-profit organization. We're not allowed to make a profit. That's not our reason for existence. We don't have shareholders. We don't have investors that need to be paid. We were formed to provide services to our customers, and that's why we exist. And you can see our mission statement here on this slide. It's to provide a reliable supply of high quality water to our customers at a reasonable price. So you can see here on this slide a number of statistics about our system. It's a pretty large system. There's a lot of services that we provide, and it's really all to make sure that we're meeting that mission, that we're providing high quality water to our customers that you can rely on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In case you should.
Mr. General Manager,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Stevenson, I just want to note that Director Weed did join us about 6:10 this evening.
Great, thank you. And welcome, Director Wee. So, one of the things that we know is a lot of times our customers don't know a whole lot about where their water comes from. And we try and share this when we have opportunities, but it's particularly important in this discussion because we are going to talk a little bit about drought. And so your water sources really do play into conditions related to drought and so forth. So this is a slide. It shows those major water sources that we rely on. So you can see from this slide that about 40% of our water supply comes from the local Alameda Creek watershed. That's about 650 square miles, a little bit east of us, from Mount Diablo in the north down to Mount Hamilton in the south, and it drains into Alameda Creek. And to me, that's really our most valuable water supply. It's under local control, but it's been impacted by drought, of course. Another 40% comes from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So this water originates up in the Sierras as snow, most of it. Much of that is from Northern California and Lake Oroville. That water moves through the Sacramento River. It's pumped into the California Aqueduct. It's pumped up again into the South Bay Aqueduct. And after about a 200-mile journey, it arrives here at ACWD, where we treat it and we store it and we provide it to our customers. And then that remaining 20% comes from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission through the Hetch Hetchy Regional Water System. And so most of that water, again, originates in the Sierras, in the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. That water needs to be moved about 160 miles to our service area. And from there, we blend it with groundwater that's produced here locally, and we further treat it before serving it to our customers. So this is, we have a great diverse portfolio that our customers have invested in. And it's important during times like these, during drought, when water is scarce and it's very expensive. And this allows us to optimize our use of multiple water sources to control costs while also providing the water that our customers need and expect. So, okay, a little bit about the rate setting process. Generally, it's an iterative process. It involves a number of steps. We show here kind of a simplified diagram that shows that process. Really, what we're showing here is the key steps in the process that we followed during this particular rate cycle. We had a series of 4 financial public workshops throughout 2022. Those were in addition to our regular board meetings to share the details of staff's analysis, our budgeting, our financial modeling, and alternatives developed based upon input received from the board and from the public. And so as part of that process, we updated our long-range capital improvement program, our financial modeling related to projected revenues and costs. And then we calculated the revenue and the rates needed to meet that cost of providing water service. And that's a really key concept for public agencies like us that don't make a profit, that only charge the cost of producing the water and serving it to our customers. It's called the cost of service. And so that's what our whole rate structure is based upon. So once we develop the cost of service, then we evaluate several rate structure options, including a special rate structure to be used in the event of a water shortage emergency, like that exceptional drought that we've been in over the last several years. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And then from that process, then we narrow the options and alternatives that the board wants to consider and that what we want to ensure that we're receiving input from the public on. And then ultimately, that's where the ultimate sort of rate proposal comes from. And that's what was provided to all of our customers in the form of that notice that was mailed to every address in the service area, was that final result of that process. Here again, I think it's really important to note that we're not a profit-making organization. Our water rates are based upon that cost of service. They're not based upon supply and demand. They're not based upon market forces. They're based upon the cost of providing the service to our customers. So there are lots and lots of factors that go into water rate increases. I can tell you nobody likes water rate increases. Staff doesn't like them, or certainly our board doesn't like them, and we know with 100% certainty that our customers don't necessarily like them. But they are things that we need to do and to ensure that we're providing the services that our customers rely on reliably. Again, 24/7, 365. So what are the major drivers behind rate increases? Well, a major component is obviously labor, and we are very upfront about that. So the labor cost pays for those professionals that serve our customers every single day. The customer service that we provide either directly to our customers or indirectly through the various services that we provide. And so labor is a big component of our overall budget, and therefore a component of our required rates. And so, as you know, labor in the Bay Area is pretty expensive. I'm showing here what we call cost of living adjustments. These are under the current contracts that are with our employee groups. We're showing cost of living adjustments between 3.14% and 3.25%. Obviously, those rates are significantly lower than consumer price index or inflation. But as modest as they are, they're still drivers to the cost of providing water service and the cost of the amount of the rate increases that we're working with today. Of course, another driver is the cost of capital improvements that are needed to maintain and rehabilitate our water system and to continue to improve the water supply reliability and water quality for our customers. Some examples are shown here. Won't go into a ton of detail here, but we're participating in a really large regional water storage project in Contra Costa County. I'll touch on that a little bit more in a bit. And then our role in improving water resiliency and in water quality related to our state water project supply. Again, that's about 40% of our overall water supply. And that comes through the Delta Conveyance project that is a major effort being led by the state of California currently. There are a number of other initiatives. We've shown costs and projects associated with environmental water quality compliance and regulations. The cost of increasing the increasing cost of water service or imported water supplies. We've shown here SFPUC, or that San Francisco Public Utilities Commission supply. That cost went up about 16% just last year, and additional forecasts are for additional increases in that cost over time. And of course, we have to remain financially responsible. We've got really a duty to ensure that we have sufficient reserves and that we maintain our payments for our debt. We do this through ensuring that we've got an excellent AAA bond rating, which actually is great because it saves our customers a lot of money when we need to issue debt. And we'll talk a bit about that in a minute too. But so there's a number of drivers for increasing costs, and that translates to needed rate increases. And that's a lot of what we're talking about today. So this slide shows some examples of some of our major capital improvements. Another big category of cost for the district, but we really try and prioritize capital projects that our customers need to maintain resilient, reliable water service. I'm showing a few on this slide. We're showing here our main renewal and seismic improvement program. That's a major component of our capital improvement program. This is aimed at consistently improving water service reliability and resiliency in our distribution system, but also in our water storage system. We're also showing here our advanced metering infrastructure project. You may be aware of this already. This is a project that is transforming our manually read meter system into an automatically read meter system. It's really expensive, but it actually pays for itself in about 10 years. That helps to keep pressure on water rates down, but it also provides our customers with really improved tools to be able to monitor and manage their water use. So it's got multiple benefits. We're showing here our clean energy program. This will reduce our overall cost of energy. It reduces our energy consumption off the grid. That reduces our operating costs. It reduces our greenhouse gas footprint by about 2,000 tons of CO2 every year. And that's through the installation of several megawatts of clean and renewable solar energy at our facilities. And then finally, to address emerging contaminants, we're kind of ahead of the regulatory requirements to install water treatment systems to remove these emerging contaminants from our source waters. These are all really expensive initiatives. We're doing these things to make sure that we can meet our mission of service to our customers indefinitely. But again, big initiatives like this cost a lot of money, and that contributes to water rates. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project. It's one of those things that we're doing to ensure that we're providing for the reliability and resiliency that our customers need, not just today, but well into the future. Just briefly, ACWD is a local agency partner with other major water agencies in the region to expand Los Vaqueros Reservoir in Contra Costa County. Because of the location of this reservoir and how it's adjacent to the State Water Project and the Delta, and between ACWD and the Delta, this reservoir really could play an important role in water supply reliability for ACWD in the event of outages of the Delta or disruptions to that state water supply that I talked about. It's about 40% of our overall water supply portfolio. It's also, this reservoir is connected to multiple water systems, and that means greater potential for water exchanges and transfers among partners. So there's some really great potential value here as part of this overall project. And so this is one of the things we're participating in. It's about $1.4 billion overall project cost. Part of it's funded with Proposition 1 money. Part of it's funded with loans from the federal government, but ACWD has a share of those overall costs. Overall, it should be if things pencil out, it'll be a great value to our customers, but this is one of the significant costs in our CIP. Okay, so then the question is, what is ACWD doing to keep water rates down and to control costs? So we've listed a few things. As I mentioned previously, we use our water supply portfolio to do a number of things, maximize water quality, but also use the lowest cost water supplies that we can. And that helps to lower our costs. It's one of the reasons why we're among the lowest water cost agencies in the Bay Area, because we do have that diversity that many others don't have. I mentioned our excellent AAA bond rating. We leverage that to bring value to our customers. We can refinance debt when needed. Just last year, we did that in 2022, refinanced some debt, saved our customers about $2 million in the process. We partner with other water agencies where we can, and other public agencies and water agencies where we can, to jointly execute projects to reduce our costs to our community, but also to minimize other impacts where we can too, like traffic impacts and paving disruptions. And in a similar way, we partner with other agencies to maximize our overall buying power by combining buying power with other agencies to secure the lowest cost we can on things that we need every day, like water treatment plant chemicals and other materials and supplies. I talked about advanced metering infrastructure. That helps keep pressure down on rates. But again, it will provide our customers with the tools that they need to keep control over their water use and save money on their water bills too over time. And we continuously work to increase the energy efficiency of our operations, keep our power costs as low as we can, and in doing so, lowering our overall impact on the environment too. And related to that is moving to a lease program for our vehicle fleet, and that provides for efficiencies and cost savings too. So one of the things, frankly, that I'm most proud of what we do and where we spend a lot of time and effort is we're very aggressive at securing external funding for many of our projects and programs. So some examples are shown here. We've secured nearly $24 million in grants and reimbursements just over the last 3 years, mostly for projects in Lower Alameda Creek related to fish passage and threatened species, but also to provide for continued reliable operation of our groundwater recharge operations and that local water supply that I talked about as being really valuable to our service area. We expect to receive nearly $10 million more over the next 3 years too. So the work that we do to go out and secure those grant funds and that external funding has really paid off for our customers. And again, I'm pretty proud of that. And again, I mentioned our strategic use of debt. It not only saves costs over time, but also spreads out those costs for those major capital program expenditures over a longer period of time that's commensurate with the life cycle or the expected life of the asset that we're working on. But it also serves to smooth out rate changes. So at this point, I will turn it over to our Director of Finance, John Wunderlich, who can walk us through where our costs are, where your dollars go, and review the specific rate proposal that our board will be considering for approval next month.
Mr. Stevenson, this is Paul Sethi.
Yes.
We have a question from one of our members of the public, Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, so
I think we can answer this before we get to the next part of the presentation. So please clarify for all of us what ACWD's share of this $1.4 billion Los Vaqueros program is.
Sure. Yeah. So, we're working through right now with our other partner agencies how the costs will be distributed, not just the cost to construct this enlargement or expansion of Los Vaqueros Reservoir, but also the long-term operating costs. So the details are being worked out right now. However, we've, and I think kind of conservatively, sort of forecast in our long-term financial planning, around $95 million over the next 25 years. So again, significant cost, nowhere near a large share of the overall program, but significant costs. I also see a question from Ms. Morgan about why did water costs go up from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and I can speak a little bit to that. San Francisco is like ACWD. They're doing an awful lot to ensure the long-term resiliency of their system. And they've spent, I believe, over $8 billion, or their overall CIP related to their regional water system was around $8 billion. And so because ACWD is really kind of a partner in that system, we share a part of that cost. We get that benefit. We get that the advantage of greater resiliency in the system. We don't have to pay nearly anywhere near that cost, but those costs do contribute to their rates, just like the various capital improvement costs that I talked about contribute to our rates. Thank you for those questions, and thank you, President Sethi, for alerting me to that.
Yeah, let me add to that for public clarification here. Our share of the Hetch Hetchy system is about 4%. So the expenditure of $8 billion is $320 million. That $8 billion is being financed with bonds. Fortunately, San Francisco is able to get at least $5 billion of that in at the very bottom of the interest rate market. And so they have to make those bond payments, and they ask their customers through the purchases of water to help repay those bonds. That's essentially what's going on in the simplest terms.
Okay, so, and I appreciate those questions. If anybody else has questions or comments, you can feel free to put them into the chat. And again, we'll be happy to talk about any of this information or any of your other questions or input in just a little bit. So until then, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wonderlich, if I can advance the slide. There we go.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So, we're frequently asked to slice and dice our budget in a few different ways. The two most common ways we presented it is either by cost element, meaning is the money spent on a capital project or district staff labor or a water purchase. And then the other way we frequently present it is based on what we call cost center, meaning kind of what's the overarching purpose of the expenditure. Is it for operations and maintenance? Is it to develop our water supplies? Kind of overhead, kind of what's the element there. And so what we've developed here is a chart where we try to present both together at the same time. And so you can see that the three biggest sections of our budget are those blue, green, and yellow sections. Yellow being capital projects, and you can see the shaded region is very small because capital projects are not labor intensive from the perspective of district staff labor. Most of the cost of capital projects are to the construction companies that are then building the asset. On the blue, the source of supply, you can see labor is also a pretty small portion of that, because most of the cost of our source of supply are payments to our third-party water suppliers, San Francisco Regional Water System and the State of California State Water Project is where a lot of that money goes. But then on the green, you can see most of the green is shaded because operations and maintenance costs, those are primarily district staff. It's district staff who are operating a treatment plant. It's district staff who are out maintaining the pipes under the ground and, maintaining facilities and doing those types of things. And so this is an overview of our total budget. On the right, we have some narrative there. This is the general fund budget, and that's where water rate revenue goes. When you pay your water bill, this is where the money goes. We also have facilities connection charges, and these are one-time fees paid by developers for new hookups to the water system. And the money received from these developers pays for capital projects. And so if we didn't have this money, then we would be more reliant on our ratepayers to fund these projects. And so we received nearly 10 million in these revenues in the last fiscal year, and about 6.5 million paid for what we would call growth related projects, or the amount of projects related to growth, right? If we have to upsize a facility a little bit, for anticipated new connections in the future. And then about 3.5 million paid for projects to refurbish or replace existing facilities. And that 3.4 million specifically is actually an offset to general fund costs, because those are fees paid specifically to reflect the value that a new customer receives from all of the existing infrastructure. All right, next slide. Okay, so where is the money going for the rate increase? Generally speaking, when we look at it, we basically say it's going to the same place as our overall budget expenditures. And so you can see when you break that up by cost element, a lot of that is for labor and benefits of district staff, a little over a third, about a quarter for capital projects, about a fifth for purchased water, and then the rest for other, kind of non-staffing related operations and maintenance costs. All right, so here's just the numbers themselves. So currently the service charge paid by the vast majority of our residential customers is $58.94 per bi-monthly bill. That's proposed to go up to $61.30 per bi-monthly bill. So, we're looking at an increase of $2.36 per bill on the service charge. And then for the consumption charge, we're looking at an increase of about 18 cents per unit. A typical customer uses about 16 units of water during a billing cycle. A unit is 100 cubic feet, which is about 748 gallons. And so that typical customer that's using 16 units per bill, that equates to about 200 gallons per day. And so, whether you use more or less is going to depend on the number of people in your household, as well as whether you're using water for outdoor irrigation. All right, this probably doesn't apply to any single family residential customers who may be participating with us this evening, but there are several thousand dedicated fire service connections. That's typically for a multifamily residential complex or a commercial complex, where in addition to their service line for normal water service, they also have a separate service line to feed their fire sprinkler system. For most residential homes that have a fire sprinkler system, that sprinkler system is served just through your regular water service connection, so you don't need a separate line. And so these are the rates for those dedicated lines. They're fairly low because, in general, they're not expected to be used very frequently, nor represent a big share of capacity needs, overall within the system. Okay, so we do have a public comment about drought surcharges and the status of the drought. I'll get into that a little bit in this slide, and I think coming up in a few slides. But the drought surcharge, which is there to ensure that during times of a water shortage emergency, the district is able to maintain stable revenues, because most of our costs are fixed, even though much of our revenue comes from those consumption charges. And so when those consumption charges decrease, due to an emergency such as the current drought, then we do need the surcharge to maintain our, our financial resilience. And so similar to the base, to the other rates, we're also proposing a 4% increase in the surcharges. All right. All right, so the customer impacts. The typical residential customer will see an increase to their bill of somewhere from $0 to $10. That covers 90% of our residential customers, split fairly evenly in that 0 to 5 bucket, and then that 5 to 10 bucket. For the non-residential customers, you see a lot more of those having larger impacts simply because, those are customers that are using a lot of water for their business needs. And so it's the same percentage, 4% increase, but the dollar amount is going to be bigger when you're, running a hotel or a restaurant or another commercial facility that requires a lot of water. Okay, this slide presents an overview of how the surcharges affect a typical customer bill. So right now, the typical customer bill, which is based on 16 units of water, adds up to $132.48. Based on the proposed 4% increase, that will go up to $137.78. So the average bill will go up by $5.30. Now, with the surcharge, if you're in a situation where you're not able to reduce your consumption, of course, you do experience an increase. So with the surcharge, if you continue to use 16 units, then you would see that bill go up to just about $151 bi-monthly. Of course, with the surcharge, it's not the district's interest that you continue using the same amount of water and pay more. What we want is for customers to be able to cut back their water use and then not experience an increase in their water bill. So if you are able to cut back that 15%, you can see here on the far right that your bill stays, essentially the same. And so if you're a customer that's in a position to save even more than 15%, that's great. We need all the help we can get, and then you would see a reduction in your bill. Okay, I see we have a couple of more or another drought comment. So I get through this slide, and then I think the next slide after this is the one to stop and talk for a little bit about the drought status. And so here's just comparing us to 30 other Bay Area water suppliers. And we're able to stay in that bottom third, even with the proposed increase. And this is really, as Mr. Stevenson alluded to earlier, because we have such a diverse supply portfolio where we have this ability to, as much as we can, focus our water use on our lowest cost sources of supply. A lot of these water suppliers on the upper end, they're really suppliers that are heavily reliant on a single source of supply, and so they don't have that kind of flexibility. All right, so first to talk a little bit about this most recent question: who makes the official declaration that we are out of a drought? The district is currently in a stage 2 declared water shortage emergency. That declaration was made by our board of directors at a noticed public hearing in December of 2021. And so it would also be our board of directors that would make the official declaration that we are out of a drought. But there are a number of things that need to be considered before they can make that type of declaration. As we can see from this map, recent storms have helped a lot. I think previous versions of this map had a lot more of the orange and red, and now we've got, some of the lighter tan color and even some yellow in a lot of places. But most of the state is still in some level of drought, and the recent rain and snow has been great and very helpful. But we're talking about 3 years of drought, and so it's going to take more continued precipitation throughout the rest of the winter and into the spring to really get completely out of the drought. When it comes to our imported water supplies, which we've talked about, these slides were published earlier this week. Those of you paying attention to the news may have heard that earlier today, the state increased its allocation to 30%. So that's great. We'll take all the water we can get, but a one-time increase to 30% of our state water supplies is not by itself enough. And then we also have the San Francisco system that's also under an emergency declaration that's trying to get conservation from its retail and wholesale customers. So we do continue to ask customers to conserve and are still trying to hit that 15% system-wide target. Next slide.
Yeah, and I can just quickly add to this because we've had a couple of good questions from the public about this issue. And Mr. Wunderlich had mentioned that, you know, our board declared a water shortage emergency here at ACWD. That was based in large part upon our imported water supply conditions. As I talked about at the very beginning, about 60% of our overall water supply in a typical year is imported. And so each of our imported supplies, as Mr. Wunderlich talked about here, San Francisco, the state, they've all been constrained, and both the state and San Francisco are currently in a water supply emergency, or they've declared a drought emergency themselves too. So these are all factors that play into how the district handles our situation going forward. Really, our board made the determination back in December of 2021 that we would not be able to meet our normal customer demands with the constraints on the water supply that we had. And so we definitely needed that 15% conservation by our customers. Our customers have been meeting that, and that's been great. And we really want to congratulate our customers for being able to help us get through this drought. The recent rains and things that we've had have been fantastic. They really need to translate into runoff into those large reservoirs, particularly in the northern part of the state. And so right now things look great, but we're not quite there yet. We'll be following things closely through the next few weeks.
Great. So, yeah, and so this next slide, there are a lot of words on here. I'll try to kind of explain what's going on, right? This is a question we're starting to get. When will we rescind our drought emergency declaration? And there are two things that we need to see before we can do that. One is the status of state level actions. So the governor has made a statewide drought emergency declaration. And through that declaration, directed the State Water Resources Control Board to adopt some emergency regulations. And so the state board's emergency regulations require water districts to be implementing the water savings actions at least at the stage 2 level within their water shortage contingency plans. So we're currently under a state regulatory requirement to implement water savings actions. Those regulations are scheduled to expire in June. It's possible they could be rescinded before then. It's possible if we see no more precipitation through the rest of the winter and spring that the state board will extend those requirements. And so that's really up in the air at this point. And so for the district to rescind its declaration, we really need two things to happen. One, at the state level, we need those restrictions to be lifted. And two, at the local level, in looking at our own water supplies, we need to be able to have enough water to meet our needs without imposing those water use restrictions. And as Mr. Stevenson was saying, the rain and snow has really helped. We are starting to see a decent amount of water come into these reservoirs. The state increased our allocation to 30% earlier today, but we're probably still a couple of months away from really knowing if this winter will provide enough precipitation overall to get us to where we can rescind that requirement. So again, hopefully, in the next couple of months, we'll be in a much better position it looks promising, but we just need to see what happens. And then in terms of the drought surcharges, as long as we're implementing these water restrictions on our customers that do push those water demands down, the surcharge is an important financial tool to ensure we can continue to provide highly reliable service and continue to move forward with critical capital projects and these other water supply initiatives that have been mentioned. And as a reminder, the drought we had in the middle of the last decade, we implemented a surcharge then. At the end of the drought, we rescinded the surcharge. This time will be no different. As soon as we rescind that drought status, that drought declaration, then the surcharge also goes away. And again, while things are looking very promising, we probably need another couple of months to know for sure. So there are a few things customers can do to try to save money. These first two items, they are based on income. So you do have to meet income requirements and show proof of that. The first is our Help on Tap customer assistance program. The income qualification is up to 250% of the federal poverty level or 50% of area median income, whichever is higher. And currently that's a $40 benefit on your bi-monthly bill. I know that the board will also be considering an increase to that credit at this next board meeting. There's also currently a one-time state administered program called the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, and it provides a one-time credit for qualifying households. The income threshold for this program is actually lower than Help on Tap. So if you don't qualify for Help on Tap, you're not going to qualify for this program. Even some of our customers on Help on Tap wouldn't qualify. But to get into this program, you would work with Spectrum Community Services, which is a local service provider who runs the Low Income Household Energy Assistance Program that's available for support on your natural gas bill through PG&E. And so it's that same community agency that helps households apply for and get enrolled in this Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. Another great way to save money, of course, is to reduce consumption where possible. I know many of our customers are already very water thrifty, and this option may not reasonably be available to you, but if you think there may be options for you to reduce your water use, we do offer complimentary water checkups and water savings devices, as well as a number of rebate programs. So we can go to the next slide. These are just some of the programs we have for our residential customers, with turf replacement, hardware rebates, smart water sprinkler controllers or landscape irrigation controllers, rain barrels. So a number of programs for our residential customers. I don't know that we have any commercial customers represented here, but we also have a number of programs for our non-residential customers that are outlined. If we could go to the next slide. Some of them are similar to what we have for the residential in terms of turf replacement, weather-based irrigation controllers, rain barrels. But then we also have additional programs with water use efficiency surveys and other tools that are more relevant to somebody that's a really large water user. All right. In terms of options to learn more, of course, we invite everyone to attend our public hearing. That's 2 weeks from today at 6 p.m. It will be conducted as a hybrid meeting, so you can attend in person at district headquarters. You can also participate via webinar like you are this evening. There will be a staff presentation followed by public comments, just like we have this evening. If you want to see a number of the formal documents and presentations that we've looked at throughout this process, those are all available at acwd.org/rates. We've got copies of the presentations from all 4 of the workshops conducted last calendar year, as well as a copy of the formal study prepared by our consultant, and of course, you can access the rate protest form through that webpage. All right, and that concludes the staff presentation for this evening. I think the questions that have come through while we've been going, we've tried to address, but at this point, we'd open it up for any further comments or questions from the public.
This is your chair for the meeting, Paul Sethi. We welcome any public input at this time. Please raise your hand, and I see Mr. Nishimura would like to speak. Please speak forward.
Thank you, President Sethi. I have basically 3 comments regarding this broad topic. The first really goes back to the whole rate setting process. As Ed Stevenson pointed out, the district is a special district. It is just not for profit. It is subject to Prop 218, and therefore its rates and charges must be commensurate with the cost of providing that service. I've been watching the district through its rate setting process, and one methodology that sort of irritates me is that it tends to use as a baseline for the operating expenses the previous year's spend. That is, it makes an assumption that, well, the cost to run the district is what we spent last year. And, from an arithmetic number, that is probably not a bad assumption, right? As a baseline to start, and then you do your annual adjustments. But what that fails to capture is if there is a built-in inefficiency in the district, that will just carry over from year to year. Right, so there is no attempt at doing what's often known as zero-based budgeting. That is actually looking at what does it really cost to provide that service, and critically look at, are we doing everything efficiently as possible? So that's one point. The second point, I know that the board I have made this comment before. The board has responded that they will consider in due time, is the lack of a tiered rate. Now, this is distinct from a stage rate, but a tiered rate is a rate structure in which the first N units of water per rate period, or the bi-monthly period in this case, is the commodity charge is lower, and then the subsequent rates consumption would be higher. This is not a foreign concept. This San Jose Water does it. City of Palo Alto does it. Your electric utility does it, both for gas and for electricity and gas, right? Where the first, what they call baseline or lifeline, or it comes by various names, but the first N units of a commodity are charged at a lower rate. And I believe this is particularly germane to this district because, as was stated in the earlier in the presentation, the district enjoys a very diverse source of water. Some of the water is available to the district at a much significantly lower cost than other sources of water. And because of that, I believe that the lowest cost of water should be distributed equitably amongst the consumers. And the consumers that force the district to purchase that marginal cost water at the most expensive rates should pay for that. So I'm a very strong proponent of tiered rates. I've heard that the board will consider that after AMI is in place, but I really don't see the nexus between the two. Utilities that don't have AMI have had tiered rates for years. And I think that that's something that the board should really consider very, very strongly. And my last point is, there's been a lot of discussion already about, is the drought over? All I can say is that, as Mr. Stevenson pointed out, Alameda Creek is probably our most valuable source of water. It nominally is shown to be 40% of our water. we had tremendous flows through that creek in the first part of January. During the New Year's surge, the flow was over 20,000 cubic feet per second. And at that rate, that rate would basically satisfy the district's needs for the entire year in one day, if I did my math correctly. And for the next 23 days, enough water flowed through the creek after that surge to meet the district's needs, annual needs many times over. Yet, from what I can tell, not a drop of that was captured for use by the customers. So yeah, I get it. There are engineering issues dealing with high rate inflows and the turbidity and all of that. But it does create a public perception problem when so much water that is in our backyards flows straight out to the ocean, and we're being forced to have a drought surcharge. So those are my 3 points. Thank you very much for listening.
So let me first ask if there are any other public comments.
I'm looking at the chat. I'm not seeing anything there.
Okay,
Any hands raised. We certainly welcome any comments.
I think the 3 points that Mr. Nishimura brought up are important. Mr. Stevenson, would you or somebody else from staff like to respond to those comments?
Sure. These are great questions and observations. I guess I'll start kind of in reverse, in accordance with my notes, in terms of the drought and the fact that this drought that we've been in has been blessed by this torrential rain, which has been really fantastic, certainly for the state. And with regard to Alameda Creek, which you're correct, constitutes about 40% of our water supply in normal conditions. Yeah, we had a lot of water running down Alameda Creek, and you are correct that we couldn't capture most of it. We are capturing that water right now. Our operations are sort of optimized for high quality water at moderate flow rates, moderate to low flow rates, which is the vast majority of the time that the Alameda Creek is running water. It's running at low or moderate flow rates with higher quality water. What we saw was very highly turbid water at extremely high rates. In fact, record water stages in the river. And so you are absolutely correct. We did not inflate our dams in Alameda Creek, and that's what we use to divert that water off stream to be able to recharge in our groundwater basin. I wouldn't say there was zero water infiltration into the Niles Cone Basin, but certainly not the managed infiltration that we normally do. Of course, there's a fair amount of infiltration into the Niles Cone right now. The Niles Cone has, for others that are participating, the Niles Cone is our local groundwater basin. It is a major resource for this service area. It's one of the reasons we were formed, in fact, in 1914 to protect that Niles Cone Basin. And so we have several programs designed to do that. One of those is to recharge that basin using water from Alameda Creek. And these very, very high flows that we had over the last couple of weeks have really been great. They have resulted in some additional infiltration, but not the kind of infiltration that we normally do. We don't want to pull very, very sort of muddy water off the creek. We call it turbidity. We call it high turbidity because what that water does is it actually slows down the infiltration rate for all of the rest of the water that we put into the groundwater basin. So we want to make sure we're pulling off high quality water off of Alameda Creek. And we weren't able to do that during these high flows. We also, frankly, because of the high flows, couldn't inflate those dams. So you're absolutely correct. Our Alameda Creek is like a small microcosm of the Delta, right? And out of the Delta, we saw tremendous flows coming out of the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta that were not captured for urban use or even agriculture. And that was kind of one of the downsides of this type of weather that we've had. What we can use best is water that flows low and slow. And that's not what we had with this deluge. But we were able to capture some. We're capturing water right now. But you're right. Our system's not designed for that, less than 1% type of scenario.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
could you add to your comments with the question I had at our last board meeting, which is the health of our underground aquifer system and where we stand compared to other years in terms of the level of water that we have in the groundwater basin?
You're right. Thank you. That's a good point to make. Our groundwater basin is in relatively healthy condition. It is not full, but it's in decent condition despite these drought conditions. We've been very, very aggressive at trying to ensure we're capturing everything we can during these drought conditions. And when we have water available from the South Bay Aqueduct, we actually can put it through a series of conveyances. We can put it into our groundwater basin. We've been very aggressive at doing that. And so our groundwater basin is above what we call tier 1, which means kind of more serious drought conditions. And it's in sort of a moderate condition right now. We could sure use more water in the basin, but it is not in a dire situation. So frankly, isn't the end of the world that we don't capture every drop. It really is a condition where we try and maximize the water quality as well as the quantity during times like this with the condition of the basin. Okay, with regard to the tiered rates, yeah, you are correct. And you have heard that discussed many, many times at our various public meetings. Our board has been very interested in tiered rates, but also recognizes there's trade-offs. And advanced metering infrastructure, and you asked about, what the nexus is. I think the key nexus with advanced metering infrastructure is that we want to ensure that our customers have control over their water use and at least understand where they are relative to those tiers. So with tiered water rates, essentially, the less you use, the less you pay per unit. And the more you use, the more you pay per unit. And I think our board has been very interested in making sure our customers have the tools to understand how much they're using relative to those tiers, so that they can ensure that they're not overpaying for water just because they didn't know how much they used. And what the AMI system does is allows people to understand their water use in much better granularity than they can certainly before AMI. Before advanced metering infrastructure, you as a customer, you really only know how much you use based upon your last water bill, right? Every 60 days, you get a sense of how much water you're using. And that's really not enough if you're in an ideal situation, if you're in a tiered rate scenario. So I think what our board has been really considering is if our customers have that kind of information, it's much easier on our customers to make a switch like that, which can be a little confusing. And so what we're doing right now is trying to equip our customers with that kind of information. And I'll tell you, we're about a quarter of the way through with installing AMI throughout our service area. So we're very excited about having lots of alternatives, not just regarding water rates, but also operating efficiencies, giving that tool to all of our customers to be able to monitor their water use more closely, find leaks, save money that way. So there's a lot of benefits that come with AMI. With regard to sort of the budgeting process that we use, certainly prior period spend definitely informs what we're likely to see coming up. But I will tell you, we do start with zeros in our budget. And I'll ask Mr. Wunderlich to add to this as appropriate, but So we don't, I can tell you, we don't lackadaisically just assume that, costs and any inefficiencies that exist today will exist tomorrow. But we do use prior costs to inform future costs, but we do look at every budget item every single year to try and get as close as we can. Times like these are kind of an example, probably in the other way than what you're thinking. We couldn't rely on past costs as a basis for budgeting future costs during these times, because costs are going up in many cases much higher than they had been in the past. I don't want to suggest that we have a total revamp. We're gonna tear everything apart in every line item every year, but we do start with zeros, and we do try and do the best we can. And in the end, frankly, we cannot make a profit. So after a period of time, if we're collecting too much, then that affects what we do with rates in the future, right? It's not like we take any extra that we collected, maybe we budgeted too high, maybe we budgeted too high and it didn't reflect actual cost. In the end, everything equals zero, right? It is a zero-sum game in the end.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
Paul Sethi, if I may just add a comment. This is a personal comment. So these are public documents. We had our finance meeting earlier in the month. And during the pandemic, like many other industries, we experienced some cost increases on our variable costs for purchase of water, chemicals, and power. And what I noted in our last budget statement that was provided by our finance staff this month is that we were about $4.5 million behind our forecasted budget after 6 months last year, and we're running about $1.5 million below our target budget through the first 6 months of this fiscal year. So we're treading water in many ways just to balance our budget requirements. That's the way I look at it. That doesn't mean that we cannot find more ways to be better efficient in the district. We will. But I think there were some attenuating cost increases that were largely due to the pandemic. I was looking at the last time we approved chemical purchases, and I was astounded that some of our purchases were up like 40 to 80%, all of a sudden. These things impact the finances of the district. So that's what I'd like to make as a comment.
Sure, and I'll just add some clarification. We do a 2-year budget, and so our really comprehensive budget review does happen every other year as we go into the 2-year budget. I will acknowledge when we're doing our mid-cycle updates, because we do take a look at it, it's maybe not quite as thorough or detailed of a look as we do when we're developing the initial 2-year budget. But each manager throughout the district is given zeros to start with, in terms of what their budget should be, and they work on building that. A lot of our costs are also, for things like capital projects. I know the engineering team looks at our capital improvement program every year. The costs of water supply, our long-range forecast for our water supply costs are based on the cost estimates provided to us by SFPUC in the state of California. And so we're building in those actual projected future costs as provided to us. Then you get a certain amount of spending that's for things like paying debt service, meeting established district targets in terms of funding certain other long-term obligations for retiree benefits. And it's actually a pretty small share of our budget that gets into some of these discretionary areas. The other thing too, just thinking in some of my past professional experience, I was a part of a number of zero-based budget reviews within the state of California. Some of those resulted in higher costs. So they didn't all actually result in costs going down. And I think if you talked with managers and supervisors throughout the district, and if they had the opportunity to go through a process, many of them would feel like they could probably justify higher staffing and expenditure levels.
So thanks, Mr. Wunderlich. So certainly we're interested in if there are any other questions or comments. I failed to note that we have a number of other folks here joining us, staff from throughout the district, from each department in the district. We have, of course, Mr. Wunderlich, who you've met. We have Sydney Ohm, Martin Coran, and Ethan Birch. From our finance department, we also have representing our operations and maintenance department, Mike Wickham, who's our production manager, Groom Awoke, who's our director of engineering and technology services, Laura Heides, who's our director of water resources. We have Shireen Gonzalez, public affairs supervisor. So we are ready to answer any and all questions you may have about ACWD and your water service. And again, if you'd like, you can type your question into the chat or the Q&A, and we can pick it up there. Or you can feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question. Everybody has been unmuted.
I don't see any other members of the public that wish to speak. Are there any other staff reports?
No, direct President Sethi, that's all we had for this evening. The final item on the agenda is simply adjournment.
Okay, I would first like to welcome any board feedback from other board members that haven't spoken this evening. Jim, Judy, John.
I think it was a fine staff report. I'm glad we recorded it. Well, of course, now it's a meeting, but you know, it's available. I think it explains a lot. I know there's a lot of issues and questions regarding the drought surcharge, and you know, we're really just waiting at this point. It looks good. It looks a lot better today, but we're waiting, and we have to wait because last year proved that we have to wait. But you know, it looks good, and that's a hard message to get out, though. So nice job for everybody.
All right, I will adjourn the meeting and say go 49ers this weekend.
President Sethi, real quick, we do have a hand up.
Oh, we do. Where?
John Weed.
Oh, I see.
A quick comment. We have 15 participants, 13 of them are district employees. We have 2 members of the public. While outreach to the public on rates is really important, we need to work on how we broaden that outreach to the public. Thank you.
Completely agree that public input is really important throughout the process, and not just at the late stages of the process like right now, but certainly through those workshops and meetings that we have during the year as we're contemplating these various options and alternatives. We certainly encourage our public to participate in all of those discussions.
Well, I will just speak for myself that I offer compliments to our public affairs staff and Shireen Gonzalez and all the members of her team. From what I saw, we did try to do as extensive an outreach as we could. And even in my own neighborhood, I met with a group of citizens that asked me to sit down with them for a tea and coffee chat for 2 hours and explain why we were going through these rate increases. So as board members, I think we're all available, and just good work on the part of our outreach efforts.
Yep.
Sometimes you don't get the public input that you're looking forward to. And I see that there's one last comment before I adjourn the meeting from a member of the public that says, "I agree. I can't believe that I'm one of two people that are interested in this topic." We actually had three, down to two right now, but yes. So good wishes to all, and I will adjourn the meeting.
Director Sethi, if I may.
Oh, yeah, please, Director Wong.
I just want to say that I agree with all the comments. Our outreach team did do a great job reaching out. However, I do want to point out that we did receive a couple of really good suggestions at our last week in-person rate workshop. I believe staff's working on that. So we definitely acknowledge there's potentially more work could be done, and we're looking into it as an agency. And the last bit is thank you to staff. I know you did tweak the presentation a little bit to acknowledge and reflect some of the comments and recommendations that we received from the in-person workshop. So thank you very much for building those in and make the modifications.
Yeah, and we've done even more extra special modifications for the February 9th public hearing. There'll be another presentation there, and we've incorporated the various comments and suggestions that we've received from our members of the public along the way. We're looking forward to February 9th.
Thank you for being so responsive.
Okay, with that, folks, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And you can stop the recording and go 49ers this weekend.
Okay, thanks very much. 7:22. All right, good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.